Today's topic is one of my research project which I was working for quite a while, and today I'm gonna share it with all of you. So just an introduction. So I work at Salesforce as security analyst. I'm also part of organizing committee for DFRWS, which is one of the oldest and largest digital forensic conference in the world. And I do a lot of public speaking as well, and I hold a master's in digital forensics as well. And my interest areas are always anything DFIR and malware analysis, specifically macOS now. Also I do Windows stuff as well, but yeah. And outside of work, I love to learn new languages. And I consider myself as a lifelong student. So I'm not a professional, I'm still a student, even if I'm presenting it here. So first of all, thank you for being here to actually listen to me. And let's just jump on to the agenda. So this is the agenda that we are going to cover. It may look like a lot, but it is not, because I don't put much content in my slides. So most of it would be images, so you can enjoy it, and I don't have to read the slides, and neither you can. So yeah. So starting off with a warning. So, lockdown mode is a, it's a work in progress feature by Apple. So it has, it does not have the full capability which Apple wants it to implement on your macOS and iOS and watchOS. So currently it is available on 4 OSs of Apple, and why it does not have the full capability? Because Apple will roll out their features or restrictions in this context, I would say, gradually as it pushes the update to your macOS and iOS. So it requires a constant research. So maybe if what you see in slide now, if you try to replicate it after 1 month, maybe or 2 months, and you might not see that, don't be surprised, because macOS, Apple might have deleted it or may have added some additional feature. So it requires a constant research. So starting off with the introduction. So I guess some of the folks who are using iOS and macOS and watchOS or iPadOS might be familiar with this kind of logo, maybe, a very small logo in your devices. So let's just jump into it, what the lockdown mode is. So it is a optional security feature that was implemented by Apple initially for iOS, and later on it has been ported to macOS, iPadOS and your watchOS. So what this essentially does is it will restrict your features that you're using. So once you enable this, a lot of your features will be disabled or, may not function properly. Why? Because this, mode will restrict all the, features and, essentially help in minimizing the attack vector on your device. In this case, macOS. So it was introduced in 2022, initially for iOS 16 and macOS Ventura. So why was this introduced? So there were a lot of reports from different people and different organizations who work or analyze the mercenary spywares on your iOS devices. The most famous name, I think most of you might be aware, is the Pegasus one, which is developed by NSO. So many people, were reporting that their phone has been compromised, and, this has been used by government agencies worldwide to actually spy on, different kind of potential, interested candidates or subjects, I would say, in the espionage context. So Apple, took this seriously, although they took a lot of time to implement it and introduce it, but they did. And currently it is available on 4 operating system of Apple. So there is a, team or department, I would say, inside Apple, which is called SIA, who's responsible for, developing all of your, security features in macOS and, not just macOS, in the entire Apple ecosystem, maybe your, iOS, iPadOS. So this is the team behind, creation and implementation of your lockdown mode. So, some of you might be wondering why I chose this lockdown mode as, my topic of presentation or even research. There are quite a lot of reasons, but I've listed down some of it here. So the first reason is it was introduced in 2022, but from the security point of view, no one was talking about it. There was no research about it, specifically from macOS side, although there was I just found one research done on iOS, and Apple is not good at documenting, lockdown mode. So this was a very, starting point for my research. And the second is the fake lockdown mode. So JAMF did a pretty good case study on iOS specifically. So they were able to mimic lockdown mode, even though it was not enabled on your iOS device, just a user deception. So this also provided a lot of insight and one of the motivation to actually explore the lockdown mode. Then comes lockdown mode vulnerabilities. So Microsoft, reported publicly about the vulnerability which affected lockdown mode, which Apple fixed in their own time. So, and the latest, biggest interest area was Citizen Lab, which is, popular for analyzing all of your spywares, iOS spywares, and, in the context of espionage. So if any user reports, that their phone has been compromised, Citizen Lab would be the ones to actually, take a look at it and present their findings to the world by writing a blog post or maybe a report. So they reported the effectiveness of lockdown mode on iOS, but not on macOS. So another good point for me to actually deep dive into it. And the most interesting is the bug bounty, because Apple has listed that this if you report any of the bug related to lockdown mode, it would be, the maximum is $200,000, which is a lot just for, this purpose. But it also has some of the limitations with what you can and what you can't report. So this is one of the things that maybe bug bounty, enthusiasts might take up. So what happens when, lockdown mode is enabled on your macOS? So all the features, this is the public documentation which Apple provides on their website, which is your FaceTime, your Game Center, your mail, messages, photos, Safari, device management, background services, WebKit, and connectivity, which includes your AirDrop and Bluetooth. And this is a screenshot. When you, try to enable it on your macOS, it will list, it will give you this list that do you actually want to turn it on, because these are the restrictions that you will face. So the first things first, how do you actually detect it? Yes, this is very helpful or relevant in the context of digital forensics and incident response. So in order to actually look into it, you have to first be able to detect it. But this, Apple makes it difficult. So you actually cannot tell it just on, if you have a device, if it's, lockdown mode enabled or not. And there are some of the reasons or caveats to it. So the first is there is no pop-up, no banner on the screen and on your lockdown, screen that this mode is enabled. The second is there is no indication on your control center or notification panel which tells you that this mode is enabled. And the most interesting is if you do not know the password of your macOS or that device, you will never know, because in order to know or detect if it's enabled, you have to actually unlock your macOS. with the device, not unlocked or locked. You will never know about this. So there I dug around a bit and I found some of the ways where you can detect how a lockdown mode is, whether it is enabled or not. The first is how do you actually detect it on a live system. This is more relevant for DFIR and law enforcement, setting or context. So there is this one-liner script. I didn't write it, of course. I just found it somewhere in the blog, written by someone else, but it does the job. Then there are specific indicators on macOS, which tells you that, yes, lockdown mode has been enabled. Then comes your second part, which is more, in the digital forensics realm, which is your forensic image. How do you actually tell if this has been enabled? So there are artifacts on the disk. There are artifacts on the log artifacts. These are the two which help you to actually detect lockdown mode. So let's just jump into how do you actually detect it on a live machine. So this is a one-line script which is just reading your .global preferences plist file, and there is a key called LDM global enabled, and if it's set to 1, that means it is enabled, and if it's 0, then it is disabled. Pretty simple. And this is the output when the lockdown mode is disabled. So once you run this on your terminal, it will give you an output of 0. And if your lockdown mode is enabled, then it will give you a value of 1. Just for quick identification in DFIR context. Then let's jump into the indicators. The first indicator you can see is in your settings app. So if you go into your privacy and settings, you'll see lockdown mode is off, and if it's on, then you'll see on. Then coming to the next indicator, a pretty interesting one I would say, is if someone has called, has FaceTimed you or called you, and he or she did not call you, before. So it's a new contact, and you do not have that contact saved in your device or your, iCloud. So it will just, block that or reject that FaceTime call, and it will be visible in your notifications. It will always not be seen, because for that, someone needs to call your, device, your mobile number, or he has to know your Apple ID. And this is the one indicator which you will not find it very easily. Then comes the Game Center indicator. So the first screenshot that you see is when it is disabled. So you'll be able to see your Game Center, which has all your profile details, your Gmail and all the other stuff if you have any friend requests. But if you have the lockdown mode enabled, your Game Center is disabled. It will just load forever, and it will never load it actually. So this is a pretty good indication that your Game Center has been disabled by lockdown mode. Then coming to the USB restricted mode, or I would say, USB accessory, restriction. So once a lockdown mode is enabled, if you connect any of your pen drives or, even if it's an external screen or monitor, or it's a SD card, if you have a SD card slot on your macOS, it will give you this pop-up saying this has been connected. Do you actually want to connect it? So the user has to take a call, say I allow it, I do not allow it. So by default, your ports are restricted or frozen, and you will see this only when your Mac is unlocked. So if you have your Mac locked, if you connect any of the USB, devices to your, USB ports, it will not work. So a pretty gray area when it comes to digital forensics. So you won't be able to acquire the, forensic image of that Mac because the ports are not working. Then comes the Safari browser indicator. So it has 3 indicators. So the first one that you see here is the lockdown ready indicator. This is when you open just the home page in Safari, which is your start page. So by default on a home page, it will show lockdown enabled or lockdown ready. And if you visit any of the website, it will show that lockdown is enabled. For this, you need to have lockdown mode enabled first. And then the last one is lockdown off. So, by default, if you visit any of the websites, it is actually enabled, but user has the, choice to actually disable it for particular sites. Let's say I want to disable it for Netflix, if I'm watching Netflix. Then you can actually disable it for that particular website, and it will have a banner called lockdown off. So let's quickly jump on the forensic artifacts, because it's very important from forensics context. So there are logs, which is called your sysdiagnose, your unified logs, Mac Analytics data. There are files on the disk, which are potentially useful for forensics. Then there are user account changes. And the last is the memory changes, pre and post lockdown, because you need a comparison to actually look what are you looking at. The first one is sysdiagnose. So sysdiagnose is a kind of log which is not readily available on your Mac OS. You have to actually trigger it, or a user has to trigger this to actually be dumped on your Mac OS. And the only caveat is if you have a live system, then only you will be able to dump the sysdiagnose. But if you do not have it, you'll not find this. And most of the commercial forensic tools do not actually parse these. They might parse it, partially, but not fully. And there's obvious reason why it does not parse it, because this is used by Apple for their diagnostics purpose and not for forensics purpose. But as a forensic analyst, you can, deep dive into it because it provides a lot of useful information. The first is your process list. So in process list, you will have something called com.apple.lockdownb. Then your kmutil diagnostics, which is your kernel extensions, those stuff. Then IO registry, then your remote CTL dump state, then running state log and sysctl. Although not very much useful for forensics purpose, but it still has those indicators that will tell you that lockdown mode has been enabled. Then coming to the most interesting thing, I would say, or log, I would say, which is called your Apple Unified Logs. And so Apple has its own proprietary logging system, which they introduced, which is called Unified Logs. So you can only view it using your console, your log command. So you actually need the machine to view it. And you can also view it using your Xcode debug console. The first indicator is, the lockdown mode has to be enabled. So in the logs, I'm not sure if you can actually see this. Maybe I cannot zoom it. So I'll just, tell you what this is. So once you enable it, so you have to enable it from your settings or your, system settings, and then go into privacy and settings. So it will have an indicator that security privacy extension is, invoked. And from there, you'll see lockdown mode is, handling all the, internal stuff. And it will have a thing called lockdown mode state to on, and it is set for all devices. So if, suppose you have, you're using iPad and iOS along with your Mac. So it is, if you have those devices connected to your iCloud or Apple account, all the devices will be affected. And if you enable it on your macOS, it will just send a notification that it has been enabled on your other device. Do you want to actually enable it on this device, maybe iOS or maybe iPadOS? So this is the initial point where you find the traces of lockdown mode. So in order to enable lockdown mode, you actually need to enter your master password to actually get it running. So what if you put or enter your wrong password? So it was also logged in Apple Unified Logs. You can see it that the pop-up has been shown to the user that enter your password, but since you entered a wrong one, it will not take any actions. In this case, I performed it 2 times, so you have 2 log indicators saying that. Then comes the correct password. So if you enter the correct password, it will give you a larger log entry saying this has been enabled for this particular user ID. The user ID here is 501, which is the admin or the current user that you're working on. Then is the interesting stuff, which is called your AirDrop and Bluetooth restrictions. So once you enable lockdown mode, your AirDrop and Bluetooth, will be, just disabled. AirDrop is just undiscoverable even if you turn it on, and if you want to send from your, maybe say friend, he wants to AirDrop you a, just say photo. Even if you have it enabled on your device and discoverable, the person sending it will not see your device. So that is the restriction imposed by lockdown mode on AirDrop. Although you can send it, but you can't receive it. Strange. Then comes your user notifications are cleared. So once you enable it, whatever notifications that you have received in your notification pane will all be cleared. Then comes the enabling and reboot. So in order to actually enable your lockdown mode, you have to reboot the device after entering your password. So it also logs that it has been enabled. The successfully set the lockdown mode state to on, which is a good indication that it has been enabled. The first one was just the initiator. It is not an actual confirmation if the lockdown mode is enabled or not, but this is the perfect indicator that, yeah, it has been enabled. And just after the state is on, it will reboot the device. Then comes your lockdown mode Wi-Fi restrictions. So let's just assume that you are at a hotel. You just checked into your hotel and you just log into your Wi-Fi. So most of the hotels will have those CAPTCHA kind of thing, or where you have to enter your room number and your first or last name to actually connect to it. So those kind of things will be restricted. It will just pop up that now this is not secure, and do you actually want to send it? Then comes your profile installation. So on macOS and iOS both, you have something called profiles, which are your MDM configurations, or maybe not an MDM configuration, but you have a mail server and you export it to your profile, so you can actually import that profile on your device. But if you have lockdown mode enabled, your profile installation won't work. It will just reject it, saying lockdown mode has been enabled. This is to reduce your attack surface on macOS, because profiles have been used by jailbreaks and threat actors to actually take control of your device, do all those stuff which it is not supposed to do. So this is one of the limitations. You won't be able to install any of the profiles, although your existing profiles will continue to work as it is. Then comes your lockdown mode WebKit font. So by default, lockdown mode is enabled and imposed on your Safari browser, and Safari browser works on WebKit. So here you can see it is actually restricting a font from passing it. So in Safari, you'll have different fonts, and Apple has defined some of the fonts to actually not parse it. Your images won't load, your font won't be parsed. So this is also something. So if you open a website in lockdown mode, if you have it on your device enabled, your website will look not as it should. The images won't load, your fonts will look different. So this is also a good indicator that I found from lockdown unified logs. Then comes the interesting part for forensic analysts, which is the artifacts on disk. The first 4 files that you see here are used for the lockdown mode working files. It has nothing to do with forensics. This is just shipped to all the devices by default. And then comes your forensic artifacts. So these are the 4 forensic artifacts which tell you that lockdown mode is enabled or disabled on your device. So this is one of the working file, localizable.loctable, and it is just saying different kind of error messages or different functionalities. If you have it enabled, what should it do? So all the warnings and banners are located here. Then there is a launch agent which is used for persistence, but it is always set to no. I don't know why. And it has those restrictions listed here, some of the restrictions, not all. Then it comes your lockdown moded.sb. So this is your sandboxed, this is a sandbox language which Apple, so of course lockdown mode is sandboxed. So this is just a description of what it has been coded to do. Then comes your working files, which is called info.plist and version.plist or property lists. So it will tell you, so every, if you have, 15.3, in this case, your macOS is 15.3, it will tell you that, yeah, this is this and your version and what is the, build version and all those stuff, the project name, the source version. So it changes after every update that you get on macOS. So this was done on 15.3 and currently I'm on 15.4 beta version because I do a lot of testing. So it will change the versions will change as the updates are rolled out. Then comes your forensic artifacts. The first one is the global preferences.plist, and if you open it and your lockdown mode is disabled, it will show you a value of no. And if you have it enabled, it will show you as yes. There is an interesting thing associated with this. So when Apple initially rolled out the lockdown mode, you can just change this value to yes and your lockdown mode was enabled or disabled. But now they fixed it. So, a good thing I would say, but it was existing when it was initially rolled out in 2022 and 2023. So it's just, looking for a key called LDM global enabled. Then comes your metadata.plist and state.plist. These two will be located in your, user library. So lockdown mode is a user setting. It is not enforced on, on a system level. It is a user setting, so a user has to enable it. That's why it is in your library directory. And I don't know why, but metadata.plist is always blank. And it is not updated even after you enable or disable the lockdown mode. But the second, plist called state.plist is actually interesting. So once you enable the lockdown mode, then only you'll see it. If you disable it, it will just vanish. So just look for this indicator. Just go in this directory, look for state.plist. If it does not exist, lockdown mode is disabled. Then comes your restrictions, which are part of state.plist. So there are yes and no values. So value equal to false means no changes were made here, and value equals to no means disabled, and value equal to yes means enabled. So here I don't think you can see this screenshot, but there are different values called AirDrop Auto Accept, AirDrop Discoverable Mode, AirPlay Receiver, Firewall, Shared Albums. And shared albums, the strange thing with shared albums in this plist file is it shows enabled, but it is actually disabled. So once you enable your lockdown mode, if you have your shared albums, it will just disappear. It won't even appear in your photos. So this is a restriction implemented, but I don't know why. It is pretty strange that it shows as enabled, but it is actually disabled. Then coming to the Safari indicator, or just a walkthrough of lockdown mode on Safari. So this is ideally when you open Safari and when you have lockdown mode enabled. So this is just a pretty straightforward view that you will see. And if you go into the settings, lockdown mode, you will see nothing has been listed here because it's just enabled. We did not add anything. But just as a demonstration purpose, I took reddit.com. So you just click on it, right click, and go into settings for Reddit. And here you can see that it is enabled lockdown mode. So this is enabled by default on all the websites that you visit, but you can actually disable it. So that is the user choice that you can make. And as soon as you hit the, disable, you will see a pop-up saying that, do you want to turn it off for this particular website? So if you hit turn off, which means in this context, you are turning it off, but it's actually you're allowing it. And it will, populate that website. So in this case, it was zomato.com. It is on. And for Reddit and Netflix, I have turned it off. So this will show you those banners lockdown enabled, lockdown off, and all those stuff. Then comes your forensic artifacts, which is, we just saw it here. How is it actually looking under the database file? So Safari just, documents it with a key, I would say, per site preferences lockdown mode key. And if you have it enabled, it will just say 1 and it will have this value. So this is also a pretty good indicator of what user might have whitelisted or blacklisted. And this is just a overview of that screenshot which I showed in the previous slide. Then comes your user account changes. So lockdown mode is a per user feature or setting. So an admin has to actually enable it. A standard user cannot enable this one. And once it has been enabled by the admin, the features are restricted for all the other users, which are standard, and the other admin users that you might have. And the guest user does not have any effect of the lockdown mode because it's a guest user. So this is a snap from the standard user. So I enabled it from the admin, but as a standard user, you cannot disable it. Only an admin can. Then comes your changes in memory. So the user agent is actually, loaded once you enable the lockdown mode. So you'll see it, the daemon loaded onto the memory. By default, it is run at load is 0. But I found it a bit strange that even if you enable it, the value of run at load remains the same. Then this is just a overview from activity monitor. So you'll always see lockdown mode D running on your macOS, and you can just go into all the details. What open files and ports does it have? Then comes the caveats of lockdown mode enabled. So the first is volatile data would be lost. Why? Because if you want to actually disable it, you have to restart your machine, and restarting it will flush out all of your volatile memory. The second, most concerning thing I would say is your restricted mode. So by default, your accessories, USB accessories are not accessible. It is disabled, and this will only appear when your Mac is unlocked. So if you have a locked Mac and you do not know the password, you actually cannot use the ports and actually acquire your forensic image. A pretty gray area for DFIR people. Then your kernel extension, loading and unloading both are disabled. Then comes your profile installation, which I just showed you in the unified logs. So in this case, I tried to install a profile, and it gave me a pop-up that lockdown mode prevented it. And just a bonus tip, so if you have lockdown mode enabled, you will not be able to jailbreak your iOS, because most of the jailbreaks are profile based, in order to actually jailbreak it, you'll have to install the profile, but you'll not be able to jailbreak it if it's enabled. Then your message search is disabled. As you can see here, I can see all the messages, but I cannot search it. So just summarizing what we just saw, so lockdown mode can be used as an anti-forensics technique as of now. I like to say it as an anti-forensics technique because no commercial digital forensics tool is actually able to recognize it and can parse these kind of artifacts and can even deal with this. Then your profile installation is disabled. You cannot acquire data because your ports are disabled. Your messages can't be searched. Your text loading is disabled. So if you try to, run any of your forensic softwares, you might have to load your text or kernel extension, and it is disabled. So these are some of the implications that are, observed about this. So coming to the acknowledgements, thanks to Magnet Forensics and Summary for providing their, forensic tool for analysis. Although I didn't use it much, but it was much helpful for me during my analysis. And these are the references that I've used. And that's all. Thanks. Do we have any questions? No. I didn't get you. This is specifically for digital forensics, personnel who are working in digital forensics and incident response. So this becomes a challenge if it's there, which nobody has discussed it yet and dealt with it as well. So yeah, those are the target audience and the law enforcement agencies as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
But are some of these features by design enabled by Apple?
Yeah, this is all of this is implemented by Apple.
By Apple.
Yeah.
So you're sort of going against their...
Yeah, I'm actually exposing them. So, yeah.
Hello. We have one more question from there.
One more question, sir. You were just showing us about...
Can you speak a bit louder? I can't hear you.
You are showing about...
I still can't hear you.
Oh, is it audible now? Hello. Hello. Am I audible now?
Yeah.
So you were discussing about Safari, and then you were discussing about an option called lockdown off for that specific tab. So how does that work? Is it sandboxing that one tab and removing all the restrictions, or is it creating the whole sandbox environment for whole Safari and it is then providing lockdown, like it is removing all the restrictions of the lockdown mode?
I didn't get your question.
There's a lockdown off button at the top right that you are showing, okay? And that removes all restrictions that the lockdown mode has placed. Like you were talking, giving an example about Netflix.
Yeah.
So is it sandboxing that one particular tab or the whole Safari application or that particular window in which we are browsing?
It is whitelisting a particular website.
Just the website?
Just the website.
So if I have clicked on lockdown off and I change my website from say Netflix to Hulu or Amazon, the restrictions will be again on the website and I have to do the lockdown off again?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.